We're at Nordic Business Forum in Helsinki. My name is Lotta Backlund. I'm here with Dick Costolo, former CEO of Twitter. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
I'm just going to jump right in.
Dive right in. Let's go.
Dive right in. What do you consider your top 3 leadership takeaways from your Twitter days?
Well, first of all, I always told all my managers at Twitter, the most important thing you can do is make sure everybody understands what you understand. What I meant by that was make sure that everybody understands the priorities, everybody's on the same page about priorities, and everybody understands why we're doing the things that we're doing. And that's a good transition to my second, probably most important leadership takeaway. My second most important leadership takeaway was it was always important for me to articulate the motivation to the team about why we were doing the things we were doing. If you get up in front of the team and tell them what they need to do, but don't give them the why, there's no intrinsic motivation and there's no higher purpose behind what they're doing. They're just completing tasks. When you get up in front of the team and you articulate the motivation for why we must achieve what we must achieve, that allows them to tie what they're doing to the organization's goals and a broader sense of success and a broader sense of achievement. And then I have to say lastly, and I'll talk a little bit about this in my speech at the conference later on this evening, a bias to yes. And what I meant by a bias to yes was, Amazon refers to this, I think Jeff refers to this as a bias to action. A bias to yes was, we should always be finding reasons to do things, not finding reasons to say no, or you have to ask these people, or you're not allowed to do that. I always wanted the team to have a bias to doing things instead of going around and asking for permission, or for looking for reasons not to do something, in order to allow us to move fast and execute, and not get bogged down in bureaucracy and process. I think those are probably my 3 biggest takeaways from scaling that company.
You're involved in your own startup right now versus you running Twitter, which was somebody else's baby. How do these 2 differ?
Well,
that must be tough as well.
They're very, very different. As I used to tell the boys at Twitter, the founders, like, listen, you're always going to be the founder of Twitter. I'm only going to be the CEO of Twitter as long as I'm the CEO of Twitter. And then I won't be anymore. But you'll always be the founder of Twitter. So they're very different. When you're the founder of the company, you have this sort of authority and speak with the influence of the person who was there from the very beginning and the person who had the idea and has a sense of where they want to take it and what it could be. And that's important to a company. It's important to setting the culture of the company. And the cultures of these companies and the DNAs of these companies are set very, very early. And once they're set, it's remarkably hard to change them. So I'm very excited about starting my new company, Chorus is the name of it, and really thinking about and taking care to set that culture intentionally early on.
Okay, tell us a little bit about Chorus.
It's a fitness platform, a software platform for fitness, software only. And the idea behind it is to take some of the concepts that work in the real world around social accountability and rituals to get people to change behaviors. I'm talking about organizations like CrossFit, but also organizations like Weight Watchers, organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous, where you have social accountability and rituals that drive behavior change and bring those online in a way that doesn't exist yet.
What social media platforms are you on?
Well, I'm on all of them.
Are you?
And I make it a point to use all of them, and particularly when something is new and something is just getting started, because I think a lot of times new platforms will be dismissed as, oh, somebody's already tried that, and it didn't work. But the reality is something that didn't work a year ago may work now for all sorts of other reasons. Maybe the landscape has changed. Maybe other ways they're thinking about implementing that technology or leveraging it has changed. Maybe the way they're thinking about their network structure and the kinds of relationships that will exist between people have changed. So I make it a point to try all of these things when they come out, as early as possible, as soon as I find out about them.
Isn't that kind of exhausting? Like, what if you get really into it and then you realize you have to post on 8 different places?
Well, you don't have to use all of them in perpetuity, so I use some of them. I try to understand whether it's important, whether this is something that is changing the rules, I thought that Snapchat, for example, very early on, and I wrote about this on Twitter. I remember people were saying that, oh, it's absurd that they're getting this. This is years ago. It's absurd that they're being valued at X billion dollars. The photos don't last very long, so they'll never be able to make any money. And, and I thought the opposite, because I paid attention to it and I understood the way Evan, the founder at Snapchat, was thinking about the difference between communicating around media, the old way of communicating, and on Snapchat, where people communicated through media. And I thought that was an important landscape shift, and is frankly one of the things that helped us understand what was happening when we bought Periscope long before it launched, because I saw that as a way that people would broadcast in the future, by communicating through media and broadcasting through their devices. And that allowed us to make that acquisition before they ever launched.
So what do you think the biggest strengths of Twitter in this battle with all these zillions of different social medias coming up?
The great thing about Twitter is, and we've been saying this for years, is it's like the global town square. It's the pulse of the planet. When events happen in the world, people go to Twitter to talk about them. It's no coincidence that when the U.S. presidential debates happen, the conversation around them is happening on Twitter. The conversation about them is happening on Twitter. It's why the company is pursuing this live strategy of integrating the debates right into the platform, integrating American football right into the platform, and I think that's a great idea.
Did you know Periscope was going to have such a big social impact when you looked into that?
Well, you're making a bet. We did the same thing with Vine. We acquired that very, very early. Those were two bets we made in Vine and Periscope that I think were the right bets. And in Periscope, when I saw it for the first time, it seemed sort of obvious to me that, well, this is the way people will break news. Someone will be on the scene with a camera, with a phone, and they'll just start broadcasting live through their camera. I don't see why this won't be the way people broadcast. And again, that wasn't just a miracle intuition. That was by paying attention to the landscape and understanding that shift from communicating around media to communicating through media.
What's the first app you open up in the morning when you get up?
Twitter.
Is that?
Yeah, honestly, Twitter's the first app and the last app I open before I go to bed. It's where I go to catch up on what's going on. It's where I go to converse about what's going on and understand what's going on, and I can catch up on things very, very quickly through that medium.
You live in San Francisco, which is obviously right next to the Silicon Valley, which is where all the big change is happening and lots of innovations are happening. What other parts of the world do you think have potential for that?
Everywhere. And in fact, I don't think it's any longer the case that disruption or innovation only happen in the Valley. Yes, a lot of it happens there because that's where a lot of the capital is, and because that's where a lot of the capital is, that's where a lot of entrepreneurs go. But Spotify, for example, in this part of the world, has been enormously successful, despite the fact that lots of those kinds of companies were started in Silicon Valley and weren't nearly as successful as Spotify has been. So I don't think that it's any longer the case that you have to do these things in Silicon Valley. I think you can do them anywhere in the world. In fact, I think sometimes not being in Silicon Valley, in much the same way Warren Buffett would say that it's been a benefit to him of being in Nebraska and not on Wall Street, is helpful. You don't get caught up in the echo chamber and following the crowd.
What do you think is the future in social media? What are the new platforms people are going to rally around?
You never know. The important thing to understand is, when the landscape changes and why it's changing and what's behind that. And I go back to my Snapchat comment earlier. And by paying attention to all these things, many of which won't be successful, but some of which will be, you can be better able to see the landscape changing as it changes. The important thing there to remember is it's usually not the case that it's obvious which of these things is going to be really successful up front. And so you try to understand what's happening and whether it's different than the things that have come before it.
So is Chorus sort of a passion project for you?
Fitness is absolutely something I'm passionate about. And when I left Twitter and looked at the wellness and fitness space, particularly online, I was surprised that there weren't any digital platforms that had really achieved massive scale. And it was, I felt, because the platforms were either very niche, they were just for running, or they were just for body weight workouts, or they were just for weight loss. Or if they were social, they didn't really think about social in the way that these offline behavior change organizations understood social. They were more like a Twitter or an Instagram or a Pinterest where you followed someone. And I thought that network structure needed to change online for fitness to work online.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll be looking
thanks very
forward
much for
to the
having
course.
me. Thank you.